The airport was packed that morning. Delayed flights, boarding calls echoing from every corner, and a restless hum of people rushing to get somewhere. Among them was an elderly man in a worn-out brown coat, clutching a leather satchel to his chest like it held his life inside. He walked slowly, leaning heavily on a cane. His hat was slightly tilted, and though his clothes were plain, his back was straight. There was something in his posture, quiet dignity, maybe that made him stand out, even as he moved unnoticed through the crowd. But that changed at gate B42. "Excuse me, you're in my seat." A woman in her mid-30s, dressed in sleek business attire and heels that clicked impatiently on the floor, stood over him. Her name was Samantha, and she wasn't in the mood for delays. Her voice was sharp, with that cold authority that says she's used to being obeyed. The old man looked up slowly. His eyes were pale gray, unfocused, almost as if he didn't hear her. "Sir," she snapped, "this is 14C. That's mine. You're in the wrong seat." He blinked, then nodded. "I'm sorry, I must have." He struggled to stand. But something strange happened. His satchel fell, and a handful of metals spilled out. Bronze stars, an old military tag, a faded black and white photo of a young man in uniform and a woman holding a baby. Samantha froze. People turned to look. "Sir, are you a veteran?" a flight attendant asked, now crouching to help him. The man nodded silently. "World War II, he whispered. "Then Korea. Then I stopped counting."
The moment turned quiet. Samantha, suddenly self-conscious, looked around and realized everyone was watching. But instead of apologizing, she raised her voice. "I respect that, but I paid for 14C. We all have places to be." The flight attendant bit her lip. "We'll find another seat for him." "No," Samantha interrupted. "This is mine. Move him." Ahem. The old man didn't protest. He picked up his cane, his medals, and shuffled down the aisle toward the back. 9 minutes, said a man near the front to his wife. That's all it took for her to humiliate him. But those 9 minutes were only the beginning. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane leveled off. Passengers shifted in their seats, some already napping, others flipping through in-flight magazines. But in seat 33F, next to the bathroom and far from where he'd originally sat, the old man stared out the window, his medals still loosely clutched in his palm. He hadn't said a word since being moved. In the cockpit, Captain Daniel Rourke, a man in his late 40s with a firm jaw and precise voice, reviewed his instruments. But his eyes weren't on the control panel. "Hey, Ethan," he said to his co-pilot, "I need you to take over for 5 minutes. "Everything all right, Captain?" "I think I know that man in 33F. Captain Rourke opened the cockpit door and stepped out. The crew watched as he slowly made his way down the aisle. Passengers barely noticed until he stopped at the very back. "Excuse me, sir," the pilot said softly. "Your name, is it Harold Mitchell?" The old man turned. His gray eyes squinted, then widened. "Yes. Do I know you?" Captain Rourke smiled. "My grandfather served with you, 45th Infantry Division. He told me about the man who carried him 3 miles through enemy lines. Said, if not for you, he'd have died in Italy." Harold blinked, taken aback. "Your grandfather, James Rourke?" "Yes, sir." Silence fell over the back of the cabin. A nearby mother turned her head. A college student pulled out an earbud. "I just wanted to say thank you," Rourke said. "And something else." He stood straighter. "On behalf of my family and everyone on this flight, thank you for your service." He saluted. Passengers nearby sat up. A man started clapping. Another stood. Applause spread forward like a wave. But Samantha, seated comfortably in 14C, rolled her eyes. "Are we really doing this mid-flight?" She muttered. But no one was listening. The pilot turned back. "Sir, would you allow me to escort you back to your original seat?" Harold hesitated, his dignity at war with his humility. "It's okay, son. I don't want trouble." But Rourke smiled. It's not trouble. It's earned. And so the old man began walking slowly back up the aisle, not alone this time, but flanked by the captain himself. What happened next would stun the entire plane, including Samantha.
The cabin was buzzing now. Whispers bounced off tray tables and seatbacks as Harold, escorted by Captain Rourke, moved slowly toward the front. Some passengers craned their necks. Some smiled softly. Some blinked away quiet tears. And Samantha. She shrank slightly into her seat, but her arms were still folded. Her expression tried to stay indifferent, but her cheeks were flushed. Not from heat. From something colder, exposure. As Harold approached row 14, he paused. Rourke turned toward Samantha. "Ma'am," he said gently, "this man was sitting here when you asked him to move, correct?" Samantha blinked. "Yes," she said, "and I had the seat on my ticket." "Understood," Rourke replied. Then he turned to the entire cabin and reached for the intercom. A soft chime rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I'd like to make a quick announcement if you'll indulge me for a moment." The plane went still. Today we have a very special passenger on board. Mr. Harold Mitchell served in 3 wars, carried countless wounded soldiers on his back, and lived a life most of us could only call heroic. He's been awarded the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart. But more than that, he's a father, a teacher, a citizen. And earlier today, he was asked to move from his seat without kindness, without patience, without recognition. Every face turned forward. This is not a reprimand. This is a reminder. We don't know the stories behind the faces we see, not until we ask, or until we see them unfold before us. Silence, then clapping. Again, louder. The man in 14 billion stood up immediately. "Sir, you take the seat," he said, patting it. Samantha didn't move. "Ma'am," the captain said again, "softer now, please." Her jaw tightened. She stood reluctantly and stepped aside. Harold sat down, slowly, gently, like it was a return home. Then, something unexpected happened. The passenger beside Samantha's new seat in the back pulled out their phone. "That her?" they whispered to someone. "Yeah, that's her." A snap, a photo, then another. By the time the plane landed, the image had gone viral. On the headline, "Woman demands war hero move from his seat, gets publicly corrected by pilot." But the story wasn't over. Because inside Harold's old leather satchel was a letter. A sealed envelope with a name no one expected. Seat 14C was silent now. Samantha stared straight ahead, but her mind was loud, louder than the engines outside. She hadn't expected this. Not the applause, not the announcement, and definitely not the photo that was now circling Twitter with thousands of retweets. The caption read, "She made a war hero move. The pilot made sure everyone knew." But it wasn't over. Next to her, Harold's weathered satchel had fallen open slightly during the shuffle. A flight attendant walking past saw it. She paused. "Sir," she said, "would you like me to close that for you?" Harold looked down. "No," he said. "Actually, there's something in there I should probably take care of now." His hand reached inside. Past the glasses case. Past the pocket Bible. Past the folded army photos. Until he found a sealed envelope. It was old, yellowed on the edges, the handwriting delicate, cursive. A woman's hand. The name written on it, "To my daughter." But Harold had no daughter. Not officially. He turned the envelope in his fingers, then looked around the cabin. His eyes paused on Samantha. She wasn't watching him. But he was watching her. "Excuse me," Harold said gently, leaning toward the aisle. "Could I speak with the captain once more?" The flight attendant blinked, nodded, and turned. 60 seconds later, Captain Rourke returned, kneeling beside Harold's seat. "Something I can help with, sir." Harold offered the envelope. I was told to deliver this one day. The woman who gave it to me was a nurse. 1945. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should find her daughter. I didn't think I ever would. Rourke looked at the name. His eyes lifted. "Sir, do you know her last name?" "Only her first. Ruth." "And her daughter?" Harold swallowed. "She said she gave her up for adoption before the war." Captain Rourke looked down the passenger list. Then he froze. Row 14C. The woman who had caused all this, the one being dragged online right now, was named Samantha Ruth Whitmore. "You think she's the one?" Rourke asked. Harold nodded slowly. "It's a feeling. I've had it since I looked at her. There's something familiar." The captain took a breath. "Should I give it to her?" Harold looked at the letter, then at Samantha. He hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet. She has to be ready." But as fate would have it, Samantha had been watching the whole exchange from the reflection in the cabin window. She'd seen her name on the envelope, and it was written in her mother's handwriting. A mother she never met. She didn't know whether to cry or scream. But one thing was certain. The man she'd forced to move may know more about her past than anyone ever had. The plane had begun its descent into Charlotte. The seatbelt sign was on, but nobody was thinking about landing. They were thinking about the man in 14 billion. And the woman beside him, who now stared at the envelope in his hand like it was ticking. Samantha's voice cracked first. "Quiet. Careful. How do you have that?" Harold didn't look surprised. He looked prepared. "You saw it," he said softly. "The handwriting?" She nodded. "That's my mother's name. Ruth Whitmore." Harold nodded slowly. "Ruth and I met during the war. She was a field nurse in France, tougher than any sergeant I ever met. We spent 3 months together, treating wounded men, sleeping on frozen cots, sharing half rations and prayers. I asked her to marry me. She said she couldn't." Samantha was motionless. "Why?" she asked. "Because she'd already given up a child, or a baby girl. Before the war. Said it was her greatest regret. She wrote this letter before she died in 1946. Samantha reached for the envelope. But Harold held it a second longer. "She wanted you to know she never stopped thinking about you." Samantha's hands shook as she took it. The seal opened with a soft crack. The pages unfolded like a time machine. "To my dearest daughter. If you are reading this, then God has worked a miracle." The words were handwritten in faded ink, but Samantha read them like scripture. "I was young and scared when I gave you up. But I want you to know, not a single day has passed where I didn't love you. If a kind man named Harold ever finds you, know that he was the only man I ever truly trusted with my heart and with yours." Samantha covered her mouth. Her chest heaved once, then again. The plane touched down with a quiet thud. The cabin erupted in soft applause. But the moment between 14 billion and 14C was still frozen in time, as passengers began gathering their things. Captain Rourke appeared once more, this time not as a pilot, but as a man who had witnessed something sacred. He turned to Harold, and then did something no one expected. He stood at attention in the middle of the aisle, and saluted. "Sir," he said, "thank you for your service, for your sacrifice, and for delivering this letter." Other passengers saw the gesture, and one by one they followed. A ripple of silence spread as people stood and saluted. Not for a war, not for a medal, but for a story that spanned decades, stitched by time, loss, and reunion. As Harold and Samantha stepped off the plane together, the gate agent, unaware of the context, smiled and said, "Family reunion?" Samantha paused, looked at the old man beside her, tears in her eyes. "Something like that," she whispered.